if you're going to get freed, somebody's got to buy you out.
That's right. Yeah.
And he does the redeeming that purchases out of that slavery.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the importance, I think, of redemption and being redeemed is that it allows us to have a deeper, hopefully, gratitude and understanding of how we've come to salvation. Well, good afternoon and welcome back to this week's Table Talk. We're so glad that you have joined us, and we're excited also that Susan Scott is joining us at the table today.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you. Glad
Susan,
to be
here. You and Stan have been part of River Oaks for many years.
13 years, maybe.
13 years.
Yeah.
A lot of that time with youth. I think
Right.
you worked with the youth
Right.
a lot. And
Right.
and currently, I did want to just ask you about one of the, I know you just love, one of your passions right now is women's ministry and SALT.
Right. SALT is a part of women's ministry. It's a meeting the first Monday of every month where we gather up as many of ladies from the church as we can, inviting every one of them to come and just fellowship and worship and learn about the opportunities that the women have to serve our God.
That's great. A lot of local ministries come in and present.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know this month will have passed once we get this. And you had Salvation Army in and that sort of thing. So the first Monday night in April.
Correct.
SALT. That's exciting time. I always overhear a lot of time when I'm in the building. So that's great. And then finally, you also work with the Seeds event every year, it seems like.
Seeds event has been going on for 5, 6, 7 years now.
Yeah.
And it's once a year opportunity, an event that ladies get together and do a lot of worshiping. And I think more of an in-service in that it's feeds the women, just like Seeds of the Soul would say.
Wonderful.
It would just kind of feeds us.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for what you do, and I know that's all rooted in your love for the Lord and being in His Word. So it's grateful that we could have you here today. So thank you.
And I want to thank Susan for one more. As a parent of an elementary age student,
Oh my goodness.
thank you for what you do in Kids Rock on a regular basis. I really
You are very
appreciate
welcome.
that.
You are very welcome. I do enjoy it there. I really do.
Wow.
Important work there.
My chance to be a kid again.
So serve. Yeah, thanks so much. And Pastor Andrew, welcome to the table.
Thanks. I think this is my first time here this season.
It is, yeah. So the message this past Sunday, Kingdom Accounting Made Easy.
Hopefully.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll see.
That's the whole line of books. Yeah. I keep taking, you're talking to me, you're like, for dummies, but it's like, no, it's made easy. And that's what we're going to be looking at in chapter 21, really spending some time on that passage about the widow's mites. Is it the same thing? The copper coins of the widow.
Copper coins in the ESV.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, without any further ado, let's just dig in. Susan, would you read those first verses, chapter 21, 1 through 4? And let's talk about that.
Sure. Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they are all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on."
Such a short passage, and yet, for me at least, I don't know for you guys, but the imagery, it's almost I can sort of put myself there. Does anything sort of come out when you think about this passage, Susan, or when you read it that struck with you?
I think just her being noticed, that she normally would not have been noticed. I think just that and the passage before that where the scribes were saying, they're going out there and being seen for their gifts and being made sure that everybody knew that they were giving. And we are working in our WOW Bible study on Matthew 6, which says that is their reward.
Okay.
And with
Being
her,
seen by man. Yeah,
she has not been seen. She knows she's not seen, or you assume that she thinks she's not seen, but is giving out of what she feels and her love for God.
Oh, that's great. And one of the things, in fact, in this entire season we're in, right, particularly now through the next six weeks or so through Luke, is I think sometimes we forget also that this just wasn't sort of regular temple worship. This was Passover week, and it would have been hustle and bustle. I mean, there's no telling how many hundreds would have come in to do their offerings in this same moment. And so for Jesus to see her was even more remarkable. It seems like, right?
That's right.
So let me ask you, Andrew, this is a question that I think in commentaries there may be differing opinions on this, but what Susan mentioned, when you go back to the last passage, in other words, context, biblical context.
Okay, yeah, we want to be mindful of that.
That's right. So we see verse 47 in particular of chapter 20. And it makes notes that talking about the scribes who, the places of honor at feast, who devour widows' houses. And then we move into, oh, by the way, there's a widow. What does that mean? Is Luke implying at all, or that Jesus is saying, this widow, you're making her do this. You're devouring all her income. Is that a different take on it than perhaps the sort of willful giving of the copper coins?
I think that would be a different take. I don't think it's the right take.
Okay.
Personally. So the commentators they're not exactly certain what it means, devour widows' houses. I saw two possible explanations.
Okay.
One is sort of, their scribes, they're like the lawyers, and so they're sort of managing the estate for the widow, but in such a way that, well, the management fee is going to be 15, 20. They're somehow taking advantage of the widows in the way that they're managing what she would have had. The other possible is sort of like the old yeller with the man that was left behind. I forget his name, that would go check in on the women folk, but really he would expect a meal and would hang out for a long time and wasn't worth a lot, that they might invite themselves in and just sort of prey upon hospitality. So they're not certain what that means. But I think as we move on and we just see, Jesus doesn't say in 21 verse 1 that he saw the scribes putting their gifts into the offering box. He says the rich. And he doesn't condemn them the way he condemns the scribes at the end of chapter 20. So I sort of see I do see a contrast between the widow's piety and the scribes. I see that, like, we can look in on that. But I don't think we want to make too much and say that God's condemning the rich here for putting in their gifts into the offering. I don't see that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's
he's
more of a
condemning the
standalone.
scribes. Yeah, and he sees the rich, which may or may not be scribes.
Okay.
And he doesn't say, like, I don't care about their gifts. He just says the widow gives more.
Yeah.
It's more of a commendation to the widow than it is a condemnation to the rich.
Okay. And the reason he says that she gives more is that word you said, it's proportion over portion. When you think proportion, what do you Susan, have you ever thought through, like, what is the biblical mandate or instruction for proportion giving? When you hear that, what do you think?
I think what I had heard was a 10%, whatever 10% might be. Is that before taxes, after taxes? Who knows? Does it matter? I think proportion is a personal thing also. It might be thinking about, thinking backwards. So, yes, I do have bills to pay. Yes, I do have things that I have to have or that I need. That is also a proportion of what I make.
Yeah.
I do have to make God a priority.
Yeah.
So what proportion am I going to give?
Yeah.
That would be that I would still be able, I still got to have faith in God that he will supply my needs.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of having the proportion and then a portion left over that you can really give from your heart.
Okay, from the heart. Okay. Mm-hmm. Andrew, how do you describe proportion? If someone comes to you for counsel and says, hey, Andrew, you said that we should give out of a proportion and not a portion. What's a good proportion for me?
Well, if people want to say, like, the tithe, 10%, in the Old Testament times, there was the tithe that went to the Levites, right? But then there was another tenth that you set aside, and that was for you to go up to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast, and you spent it there on the sacrifices. And then every third year, there was another tenth that was just sort of went to the needy, that went to widows, orphans. So that was maybe, I don't know, 23, 24%. I think there's still something about that tenth that seems to be healthy, but I would describe it more as like training wheels than some sort of rule. And I forget who it was that said that, but it's almost just like, it's just a helpful number, because sometimes when you think about, well, what do I really want to be happy? What do I need? Well, everybody just feels like they need 10% more, and that can be kind of enslaving. And so almost as maybe as a way of breaking ourselves out of that slavery and experiencing freedom in Christ, it's that same number, just in the opposite direction.
Yeah, no, that's a good word.
But I'm not married to that, I think.
Yeah.
A starting point.
Yeah.
Training
Possibly,
wheels. Let's
yeah.
just think about it this way. Yeah.
Training wheels.
That's right. And I guess, again, circumstantial, personal conviction, cheerful giver out of the heart. And yet at the same point, you mentioned, at some point there ought to be a level of sacrifice to it, like David, the threshing floor, right? I won't give to God what didn't cost me anything, right? And so if I'm sitting on a good bit, it might be that, well, maybe I could be using that kingdom work, and that percentage may be totally different, or little or less. So,
Yeah.
okay. So is there a caution? When I read this too, and I think about, giving more, it seems like Jesus is saying she's more blessed. At least I'm thinking higher of her. Is it tied to our giving? If we all give proportionally like the widow, like here, everything, is Jesus saying, well, hey, he gave more. Let's see what we can do for him. You know what I'm saying? There's almost like a health and wealth to it to a degree, or we can distinguish that with other teaching.
I'm not a health and wealth fan.
That's right.
David. Maybe I should let Susan go first. I just jumped in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a heart thing.
Yeah.
You give from the heart. You've already got, as I said, you give the training wheels portion, and then from there on, you give from the heart.
Yeah.
If you go out and you say, oh, I see this need, I'm giving.
Yeah.
May or may not have it in my budget, but I see the need. So it's a heart thing.
And if you're giving like the widow, and you're being commended for it, you're also probably not expecting the health and wealth aspect. You're offering as a worship, and that's truly all you want it to be.
Not a seed faith. Yeah. This passage reminds me of in Mark of the widow who anoints Jesus' feet.
Okay.
At Bethany, and she just breaks that jar.
breaks
And it's
it
an
up.
incredible amount of money. It was like the equivalent of 1 year's wages, and it's like, how could it be sold and given to the poor? And it's just, I'm a practical person. Maybe that's why I'm an executive pastor. I mean, I like to plan. I like budgets. I like to do things that are prudent. And so just before we try and here's why this wasn't a good idea for this woman to do this, or for the woman who anointed Jesus' feet. It's just, I don't know, maybe just roll around in the passage for a little bit and say worship that's sincere and sacrificial and from the heart like that. Just to say Jesus loves it. Just leave it at that.
Yeah. No, that's a good word.
Yeah.
Good word. Well, I do want to mention it. That was wonderful. I'm coming. Maybe the older I get, I hope the wiser I get. But the older I get is, we can spend so much time in small passages. We should. I mean, they're very rich, and so I really appreciated that you took 4 verses, and I mean, that was the message, what we needed to hear, and not the entirety, of the chapter. So I appreciate that. At the same time, our small groups this week have been tasked with the entirety of chapter 21.
That's a lot. Yeah.
So I thought maybe we just highlight 1 or 2 other areas, and the one I wanted to really look at was what follows. Sort of that verse 5 through 9. Can you read that, Andrew? And then let's just talk just a little bit about that.
And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with noble stones and offerings, he said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon the other that will not be thrown down." And they asked him, "Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?" And he said, "See that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and 'the time is at hand.' Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once.
Yeah, I've really, this passage has resonated with me this week. And I hope I have contextually the right imagery in my mind, the informed imagination of this passage. Again, Passover week, the hustle bustle, the smells in the air, the songs in the air, the worship's going on, the sacrifices. And I just sense that the disciples are walking with Jesus, and all of a sudden their eyes turn toward the temple. And there were gold statues, there were gold plaques. There was just, it was just magnificent, right? I mean, this temple and how beautiful it was. And almost like right there, the Son of God is among them, and their eyes kind of get drawn to, wow, what's been made of man's hands. And Jesus is sort of correcting them back into that. Say, okay, guys, over here. you know this thing's going to be destroyed, right? As beautiful and just overwhelming as it is, there's not going to be a stone, unturned right here. So my question in that, though, is when he says that, it certainly brought him back to reality. When will this happen? Is he saying that this is what's going to happen in history, like near history, AD 70, destruction of Jerusalem? Or is he saying, when I return, that this is what's going to happen to Jerusalem and all who don't follow, right? What does he mean here, I guess? What's the word? What's he mean by it'll be destroyed?
I'm going to be curious to hear yours since you've given thought to that this week. Okay. Do you want me to go first, Susan? Or?
You go right ahead.
I think primarily he is referring to 70 AD,
okay.
and 5 to 9. But it doesn't exclude that there could be some capitulation of that where it also previews what would happen before his second coming. But I would think primarily he's speaking of 70 AD, and it might very well mirror what will happen at the end days before he returns.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
I think it's prophetic to that sort of current generation as well. I think, again, we lose sight of just how amazing this temple was and how the religious leaders, guarded it as almost what they worshiped over God.
Yeah.
It just seems to match up to what happens in AD 70 more, that not only was the city destroyed and the temple destroyed, but, have you ever been to Rome? Mm-hmm. Either of you? Have you been to Rome? Have you seen the Arch of Titus?
I can't picture it right now, but
okay, so,
we crammed a lot in, so maybe.
Yeah, so it's real. Look it up if you're hearing this online. So the Arch of Titus was the emperor in AD 70, and so under the Arch of Titus, which was constructed based on his sort of over this victory, so to speak. There are engravings of the menorahs and the gold and everything from the temple in Jerusalem being carried back to Rome.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like there's this standing sort of lasting reminder of both, the words of Jesus and his prophecy to that, and then actually, that coming true just, 30, 40 years later.
Yep.
And I think even in the temple, there were some, a lot of things that even Herod himself had constructed and built, and they just continued to just build it up in a way that we were worshiping the creation and not the creator.
Well, I heard it was definitely on par with like one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. That it was even larger than the Pantheon in Athens. I mean, in terms of the perimeter of the temple was almost a full mile, I think, right? Something close to a mile.
Have you been to Jerusalem?
I have not.
Yeah, me neither. I always ask that. I've not been to Rome.
It's on my list.
Yeah. Did you see the diagram that Andrew used for the temple layout? Did you catch that?
It was a quick slide.
It was a quick one. I thought that was one of the better ones I've ever seen, because it showed sort of the women's court, as it was known, right? That's where all these offering bins were.
Yeah.
13 of them, I think, is historically. And then it showed the Gentiles' courtyard,
which would have been outside that,
and just how massive the entire temple was to the Holy of Holies, right? To the actual area there. So that was a great image as well to be helpful in that. At the end of that, though, let me ask you this. Susan, you hear, all these things will happen as well. And he says, but verse 9, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. When you hear these things or you see these things taking place, right? These will continue to take place. Does that give you a sense of comfort, or is it still easy to be terrified?
Both.
Both,
Yeah.
yeah.
For sure.
I don't know if he was. I don't know. So y'all will have to go along with this. Is this a parable almost that he's trying to go over? You know, the first part could be real, and then this, like in verse 6, the stones will be turned over, and then verses 8 and 9, but we don't know when. I mean, it's almost like a parable of and they're asking, "What do you mean? What do you mean?"
Yeah.
And he's not totally explaining it. He just says it's coming.
Yeah, I think it's a teaching he's consistently used, and he's used parables to sort of indicate the same teaching that, when you hear things going on in the world, when people come in my name, when you start looking to when I'm going to come, and all you're fixated on that, what I'm telling you to do is don't worry about it. Stay awake, stay alert, and just be ready, right? I mean, there's an indication that don't be afraid. I'm telling you right now what's going to happen, beginning with what's going to happen to this temple and this city. And so when this happens, you remember me, remember these words and stay awake. I think that's maybe a way of looking at it. I mean, that's such a consistent teaching throughout the gospel. It seems like over and over, it's a good word for us. I mean, that's an application for us today as well. Anything else in 21 before we look at our essential moment? Was there anything else that struck you, Andrew? Anything you almost preached on?
Oh, boy. Well, we better not go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 34, 36, I think he picks back up on that whole stay awake, stay ready, right? Don't give in to the drunkenness and the
dissipation.
Dissipation. I don't know what
The
that is,
partying,
but I don't
the
want to give into it.
carousing, yeah.
The partying, the
I guess,
carousing, the cares of the world, right? Don't get consumed by those and miss it.
Yeah.
When I return. Wow, that's good word. Good word of encouragement. Well, good. Susan, was there anything 21 that?
I think all of it was just on a warning.
Yeah, that's what this
warning.
chapter really is, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Look and see, but make sure you look up.
Yes. Yeah, look up. That would have been a great title, too, for a message in it. Yeah, we'll file that one away. Yeah, look up.
You might see that again.
I like that. Yeah, good. All right, our essential moment. So far this year on Table Talk, we've looked at these essential foundational truths, right? What's salvation? What is justification? The kingdom of God, who is Christ. This week, if you look at verse, is it 21, I believe? Or 21, 28. If you look at verse 28, what we read is that now when these things begin to take place, all these things we've talked about, right? Straighten up and raise your heads. Look up, because your redemption is drawing near. Redemption. I remember as a child, probably as a youth, maybe as a college student, maybe even as a young adult, hearing this word a lot, reading it a lot, and not really giving thought to what it means. It's those churchy words, right, that just kind of pass through us. How do you
redemption?
Redemption, yeah. What redemption? Okay, great. That's probably in a song, right? There's an old hymn, probably redemption's in the song. I've been redeemed, right? What is redemption? What does it mean to be redeemed? When you hear that, Susan, and someone says, "Susan, are you redeemed?"
I think a part of it, at least, is forgiven.
Okay.
That we have asked for our sins to be forgiven,
Okay.
and that asking has been accepted.
Okay.
And we can go forward with the thought that we will be with Jesus.
Okay. All right. So there's an association with salvation when we are redeemed. Andrew?
I think for me, I think of coupons or, buying a treasury bill with the idea of, it'll say on it, you can redeem the coupon for whatever 50. But the idea is you give it to the cashier, right? And then the manufacturer buys that back. It's not just, hey, you get 50 cents off. Somebody's going to buy back that voucher, or somebody's going to buy back that T-bill that you purchased. And so for me, I think when I think about redemption, I try and read that idea of being bought back, being purchased.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the understanding of a lot of these words that are deeply theological in nature and biblical is that we use them in a different way today, because you're right. A lot of us go to, well, I redeemed a coupon, and we don't even think about what's going on behind what it means. But and so we're gaining possession of something, basically paying for it in some way. Biblically, I think it had that connotation of being freed, right? Someone paid a ransom. If we were redeemed, usually a ransom was paid to buy our freedom. And so when someone says, I'm saved, but do I need to be redeemed too? Well, I think they're hand in hand, right? It's one and the same. The importance of redemption is knowing how your salvation took place, right? It was Christ on the cross who said, I will redeem you. I will pay the ransom for your freedom. And so because he has redeemed us, we have the opportunity to find salvation in that, to receive what he did in that redemption. It's great. I mean, it's a rich word because
like slaves in bondage, if you're going to get freed, somebody's got to buy you out.
That's right. Yeah.
And he does the redeeming that purchases out of that slavery.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the importance, I think, of redemption and being redeemed is that it allows us to have a deeper, hopefully, gratitude and understanding of how we've come to salvation, not just to believe and receive, confess and believe, which is Romans 10:9 says that's all we need. But when we step back and we go, oh, the reason I can confess and believe is because Jesus purchased that opportunity.
Yeah.
He redeemed me on the cross and bought back my relationship with God. Big word. And so here, your redemption is drawing near. What does that mean there?
I'm glad you've been giving thought to that this week, David.
Oh,
but I would say when we switch to verse 25, I do think he's switching now from talking about what's going to happen to 70 AD to more end times. And so I think as we wade into that, your redemption is near. He's not talking about something at 70 AD. He's thinking about the return of the Son of Man.
Yes. Yeah. The culmination of having been redeemed is going to be made complete. It's drawing. Yes. The redemption is drawing near. The Redeemer is drawing near, and so all of this will be culminated. You'll experience the full redemption.
Yes,
not just the partial.
We do it in part. The already not yet tension there. Yeah.
All right. Good word. Yeah. Thank you, Susan, Andrew. Essential moment. And thank you for joining us at the table this week.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
This is great, Andrew. Thank you so much. Message. And thank you. And we look forward to joining you next week in chapter 22. We're going to be looking at the origin of the communion, Eucharist, Lord's Supper at Passover. We look forward to joining you there. Have a blessed week, friends.